This week, Daniel Corbett from Fastly is with us to discuss the wide world of WAF. Then Andrew Mundell from Sophos joins us to talk about optimizing security investment with MDR. Finally, in the enterprise security news, not a whole lot of funding. Outpost 24 picks up an attack surface management vendor. Private Tech is launched. That's the name of the company. Now you're confused. Redacted goes out of business. That's also the name of the company. Now you're confused again. Pick better names, security startups. Layoffs, hot takes. 80% of boards think they've got security covered and figured out. But then we've got a survey that says only 14% really know what's going on. Mass extinction events, a whole bunch of AI stuff, all that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly.
Attackers are only getting more proficient, so how can you proactively adapt your cybersecurity strategy? Core Security by Fortra helps you uncover and prioritize the risks that pose the biggest threat to your organization. Core Impact is a penetration testing tool that safely finds and exploits vulnerabilities using the same techniques as attackers. You can conduct advanced pen tests with ease using certified exploits and automations. Take your engagements even further by pairing with our additional red teaming tools from Cobalt Strike and Outflank. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Fortra Core Security. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy National Megalodon Day. This is episode 321, recorded on Thursday, June 15th, 2023. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria. Also joining me is the Czar of Zero Trust, the captain of content, Katie Tytler. How are you, Katie?
I'm well. How are you on National Megalodon Day? I really didn't know what that meant at all.
You don't know what a megalodon is?
I do now.
Have you ever seen, well, you haven't seen the Meg then. You need to go watch the Meg.
I haven't.
It's a fantastic documentary about
a fantastic documentary.
with the one Jason Statham. It's fantastic.
It is. It's a lot of fun. I mean, if for the type of movie that it is, you just can't take it too seriously. It's great. Also piping in there, that was the Baron of Bloodhound, the Pirate King of PowerShell, Sean Metcalf. How you doing, Sean?
I'm doing good. I just got really excited to hear about the Megalodon. So, like I said, the Meg, I love watching the cheesy movies from Sharktopus to Attack of the Three-Headed Shark to Sand Sharks, usually shark-related.
Creature features.
Yeah, the Meg goes right into that. And it's Jason Statham, so
any
what's
of
better?
those existed. I had no idea any of those existed. So you learn
like
something new
sci-fi
every
movies.
day.
Welcome to the genre of creature features. Like
Yeah,
it's in the beginning, it was just Godzilla, and it's just really expanded out. For those who don't know, the Megalodon is the unless something's changed, and since I was a kid, but largest shark in history. Extinct, allegedly extinct. Go watch the Meg, see if it really is.
There is a second Meg movie that's coming out, so because of Meg 2, we have to wonder.
Yep. Yeah, we're always making new discoveries in the ocean. Who knows? Large things lurk in the deep. All right, a quick announcement here. Join us at an upcoming official cybersecurity summit in a city near you. This series of one-day, invitation-only, executive-level conferences are designed to educate senior cyber professionals on the latest threat landscape. We are pleased to offer our listeners $100 off admission when you use code SECWEEK23 to register. That's SECWEEK 23. Visit securityweekly.com/cybersecurity summit to learn more and register today. All right, and for our first interview here, it is sponsored by our friends at Fastly. Today's topic is wading into the wide world of WAF, and yes, I was very proud of myself for the alliteration in that title. We are excited to have Daniel Corbett from Fastly with us today. Daniel is a staff product manager on the security product team at Fastly and works on the signals and rules that power Fastly's next-gen WAF. Welcome, Daniel.
Hey, thanks so much, Adrian. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you. That video quality is great, by the way.
Oh,
I don't know what you're
thanks.
using there, but it looks awesome.
I have a DSLR. It's a Canon EOS.
Well, it paid off. It's worth it.
Nice.
Yeah, I'll upgrade here at some point, but yeah.
Wading into the wide world of WAF, is that like www?
It's a lot of W's in it. Yeah, so WAF doesn't come up a lot in the show. I mean, we tend to spend a lot of time on emerging tech and things like that, but obviously these, this is a pretty standard tool that most organizations have and deploy, and I think it's worth jumping into and talking about, the latest of what's going on with it, new features, new ideas, new technologies. And, of course, the term next gen gets thrown around with a lot of these technologies that have been around through, several product cycles, through several, in security, we see entire startup cycles every like 4 to 6 years. Sometimes people go back and try and reinvent existing technologies. And I think, the product that we have today is was a result of building a WAF with the benefit of hindsight. I think maybe kind of like a second generation of WAFs that said, maybe there's a better way of doing this.
Yeah, that's right. We all know there's a very long history of WAFs, and as you said, most organizations have them enabled in one way or another. But I think that there's always been this constant struggle of managing it, right? Tuning it, constantly dealing with false positives. And as we enter, more into cloud native architectures where applications are being deployed several times per day, in some cases for large organizations, hundreds of times per day, how can what we refer to as a legacy WAF keep up with that, right? Keep up with not blocking legitimate traffic. And what we've seen is many organizations who have a WAF just have it in logging mode. They actually don't even have it in blocking mode because it's causing so much friction amongst their teams.
And just as a sanity check, these days with a WAF, are they typically just putting it in front of websites, or do you guys extend to cover web-based APIs as well these days?
No, that's a great question. Definitely, we're seeing coverage amongst all different application types and APIs. For the Fastly Next Gen WAF, we specifically support what we north-south traffic. That's traffic coming in from the edge or the internet layer into the application, but also that east-west traffic, which is what we're starting to see more usage of within these cloud-native environments. That east-west traffic is typically used for service mesh technology, things like Envoy proxy, so on and so forth, and protecting that service-to-service chatter that happens. So yeah, we're definitely we cover both standard web applications and APIs, but we're also seeing in APIs where that stretches a bit as well, because historically APIs have always been REST based, right? JSON, and we're seeing more and more organizations move into GraphQL technology and wanting to do because it comes with a wide variety of improvements over REST-based APIs. But like we all know, with every new shiny toy that comes out in tech, there's always new shiny attack surfaces, and also some of the old ones as well, right? So
yeah, SQL injection will never die apparently, and now we have. Now we have prompt injection, and we just we see it keep coming up. The research team where I work at Valent Security, can't talk details yet, but we just found a vulnerability in a very popular SaaS application where we were able to recover session keys, basically using what looks exactly like blind SQL via the API.
Yeah, I definitely believe it. Like I was mentioning with GraphQL, I have a demo that I run on that shows what's a quote unquote modern application. Now, granted, it's written to be vulnerable. It's actually called Damn Vulnerable GraphQL Applications, available on GitHub. But it showcases how modern applications can be susceptible to SQL injection, like you're talking about, command injection, cross-site scripting attacks, but also even GraphQL specific attacks like in recursive queries, and which can cause DOS attacks and things of that nature. And so, yeah, you're right. Some of these attacks are just not going away anytime soon. And we just saw it. There was recently a vulnerability announced within the last few weeks called around a software called Move It. And that also focused on SQL injection, right? And so it's not going away anytime soon.
Do people put you in front of, just random question here, since you mentioned Move It, in front of commercial off-the-shelf stuff as well as their own proprietary stuff?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question, which is why our WAF supports a wide number of deployment options. And that's another thing, like historically with traditional WAFs, usually, I'm going to date myself here, but you go back and you have these big bulky appliances that you throw in a data center somewhere, and they may be in line with the traffic or port mirroring or whatever it may be, right? But then like we've started to see like a pop-up other organizations coming up where, you know, they move the WAF completely to the edge and at let's say the CDN layer or whatnot. But we don't have a lot of organizations who offer or softwares that offer flexibility of kind of doing both of those things, protecting from the CDN layer if you want to do that deployment option, or moving into your environment. And with the Fastly Next Gen WAF, we support like over 30 different deployment options, everything from Nginx and Envoy and HA proxy and Kong, and we even support Microsoft IIS, and then if we can't fit into any of these combinations, we also offer a reverse proxy software that you could just pop in front of one of those technologies that you're talking about, this out-of-the-box software. Maybe you can't extend it. Maybe it has its own web server capabilities that you can't plug into, and you can take our reverse proxy and plug into that. Or, and then as an alternative, we also offer like the edge delivery component, which would like operate more at that CDN layer. So yeah, it's really important to have that flexibility to basically deploy your WAF in the environment of your choosing.
So since we're talking about architecture, maybe it's worth jumping into what a WAF actually is, and even with terms like north-south and east-west, I've heard people with different definitions of those. I think clearly north-south to most people means between your private resources and the internet, whether those are in the cloud or in a private data center. That internet boundary, that edge boundary. But with east-west, I've heard different definitions, like some people define as like, the space between user segments and server segments, or just between different parts of the server segment. So maybe first, let's just jump into the purpose of a WAF and what people are using them for.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the purpose of the WAF is to protect you from what you don't know, the unknowns, right? We all know that there's no such thing as bulletproof software, and no matter how much corporate training happens where folks have to go through these different secure development trainings and practices, mistakes happen. We're all human at the end of the day, and there's novel attacks as well where folks are able to take maybe a very small attack vector and combine it with another one and kind of pivot through vulnerabilities. And so a WAF helps to protect you from these things that you just don't know about today, right? And they come in a wide variety of forms, and some of them are broad, like we're talking about SQL injection and command injection, and there's also log4j attacks, and some of them are more narrow or application specific vulnerabilities. And So WAF helps to protect you from those things that you just don't know about. I mean, if we knew our applications were vulnerable, we wouldn't need to have a WAF. We would just fix them. Yeah. So exactly.
Right. And so so I guess the next question there, like the architecture, you talked about different deployment options, and in the old days, it would just be an inline appliance. Like I remember working at a company, I remember the moment I was troubleshooting something and realized that we actually had 3 stateful firewalls in line between us and the internet, because our old school appliance-based WAF had a stateful firewall built into it, which was managed by somebody on the security team, and then or maybe the web team. And then we had a application delivery controller that was managed by yet somebody else that also had a stateful firewall on it. And then we had the actual next gen firewall that we used, which was clearly a powerful firewall. So 3 different people to talk to when you're trying to troubleshoot and figure out why something is breaking or not getting out.
Hope you weren't using NAT. I was like,
no comment. But yeah, let's let's talk about so deployment options, because you can still deploy this kind of inline in that appliance format, right? Mm-hmm. But Signal Sciences was one of the first companies I heard about. Did they call it RASP? It was a different deployment model.
Yeah. Yeah, we have, what we refer to as a RASP integration, but it's just another way to hook directly in, because like you're saying, like there's all these different layers. Like somebody may control the load balancer. You may work on this certain application team. You don't have access to that, or it's difficult for you to get things done over there. And so we offer a plugin capability in a wide variety of languages, from JavaScript and PHP and Java and Python and Golang, and we could plug into all these major languages, and essentially we operate on a module server deployment. And so when you plug in with, let's say, if you're just using Java or something, you can add some code into your Java application, and as the requests are coming in, it will automatically be passing those requests on to the local agent for decisioning of that. But yeah, I mean, we support so many things. I think the most recent one we also came out with was support for running our WAF within AWS Lambda. So, we're starting to see more serverless traction, and so we just want to be wherever our customers and technology is going. And another one that we just, we mentioned architecture a few times, and I think that's an important word, because we've also started entering into allowing our WAF to be run on ARM architectures as well.
So you've been talking a lot about the WAF and APIs, and that's all great. I want to step back for a second, because you're talking about the Signal Sciences history. And of course, Signal Sciences was acquired a few years ago by Fastly. So can you talk a little bit about why that happened, how the company is evolving, and what kind of tech challenges are precipitating or continuing, I guess I should say, continuing to grow the company in this direction?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the history of Signal Sciences is that the co-founders of Signal Sciences were working at Etsy, and as you know, Etsy's a online store, and they were constantly dealing with false positives of their existing WAF solution. Imagine you're an online store, and the variety of search queries that you're getting for products, right? And not only, let's just say, like properly spelled out search terms, but also typos, right? Sometimes folks are, typing something up to search, and they hit the wrong key. Their cat steps on their keyboard, whatever it may be, right? And they were just dealing with a high influx of false positives, and so that caused them to look at.
Also, not to interrupt, but also dealing with such a global company. I think that's a huge part of Etsy's business and a critical part of the traffic and
Absolutely.
legitimate traffic from places. Like I literally just ordered something from Bulgaria. So that's a huge part of it too.
That's an amazing point, and you're 100% right, because the other thing that comes within that globalness is different spellings, right? And different
Yeah.
Character sets.
Character sets. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. And so, there could be words that they just randomly have a single quote somewhere within the word, and that's even in last names and things of that nature. And so, a lot of times with these like legacy WAFs, they would block these things. They're like, oh, there's a single quote in some text. That's bad. I have to block that. And so you're right that with the globalness, it adds an additional factor. And so I think, like we all know, like everyone who's had to deal with a WAF, it could be very painful to tune it and tweak it. So the founders of Signal Sciences set out to create a new way that could help support what they were dealing with. Like they were dealing with this challenge on a daily basis, and so they created a technology that we call Smart Parse. That's basically able to analyze requests and the various parameters and tokenize them and basically do a lexical analysis on them. And so and that helped and to basically reduce a number of false positives, because like the way that we look at things, and this is very near and dear to my heart, is that sometimes something can look bad, but it's not a real attack, right? And with Smart Parse, we're able to make that distinction between something that just looks bad and is actually a real attack. And that's an important distinction because, again, like imagine you're an online forum that answers tech questions, or people can post tech questions. How do you run a WAF on like a legacy WAF on something like that, where folks are constantly copy pasting SQL queries or whatnot, right? It gets very, very difficult. And so that's why it's important to kind of understand the context of the request and to be able to understand whether it's an attack or not. But to get back to your question, so Fastly saw the power of Smart Parse and the product that Signal Sciences had created, and Fastly made an acquisition of the product, and we've just continued to work growing it. Some of the challenges that we see is that the threat landscape is just constantly evolving, right? We saw there were a few months back, there was a new JSON SQL injection variant that was released that used all these JSON functions that many folks were not aware of. And so it's just, you have to constantly be keeping up. And so we have a lot of internal tooling that we use to help identify these new variants before they get found in the wild, helps us to identify false negatives that could exist, or false positives, and we're constantly tuning and tweaking and improving our WAF to account for those things.
So we have a back channel here, a Slack back channel, and as you were talking about Smart Parse, Adrian sort of tongue-in-cheek said Smart Parse, aka not regex. But that brings up a good question, because everybody uses regex. Why don't more technologies rely on Smart Parse?
Well, it's for one, it's proprietary to Fastly. And so that's one of the reasons. But yeah, regex is a problem. Kelly Shortridge, who works at Fastly, just put out a blog post within the past week called Regex in Retrograde, and it's pretty interesting because one of her analogies basically equates it to someone walking in to a car dealership in a modern era and starts asking if the car has blinders or buggy whips or harnesses and bridles and they're like, no, we don't have those things because it's a car, and so it's kind of the same thing where it's just like working with Smart Parse in the industry is a bit of a paradigm shift, right? For sure, because when you're used to dealing with regex, listen, I'm a big fan of regex. I've used it countless times, but the reality is when you start trying to construct these very complex rule sets, they can get extremely difficult to manage. And we all know as well that it also comes with processing costs, right? The first question I think that everyone always asks whenever something is using regex anywhere, not even in a WAF, just like within applications anywhere. I've been in many architectural discussions, and it's usually, well, what's the performance hit of using this? Can we use something else? Because there's just performance hits. There's a lot of, it's difficult to understand and things like that. So smart parts just changes things significantly. One last thing I'll just say is, like, a lot of times folks are used to coming in from legacy WAFs that have over 3,000 rules, and they come on to this next gen WAF and using smart parts, and they say, where are the 3,000 rules? And it takes a little bit for them to realize. But once they have that aha moment where they're like, oh wow, like I don't have to sit here and fine tune and tweak and manage 3,000 rules. That means I can actually focus on digging into the threat data and attacker data and free up my time in a more valuable way.
Yeah, create
Daniel,
every, like, copy and paste. You're creating every possible iteration of like one rule with that old system, right?
Yeah, exactly that.
Sorry, Sean, go ahead.
Hey, Daniel, I worked for an organization that had a number of Microsoft IIS servers back in the day when they were being regularly and actively exploited. Microsoft started building in some WAF-like capabilities to sort of filter out the known bad things. So this question is more around WAF best practices. What should companies know before deploying a WAF? And for those who have already deployed a number or some, what are some of the things that they should check for?
That's a really great question. I mean, I think that companies need to understand like some of the problems that they're trying to solve by deploying a WAF. Like I said, some of it is unknown. In some cases, you just don't know. But I think that when you deploy a WAF, it's important that, I think the number one thing that we all want our WAF to have is visibility and observability. Because if I'm going to turn something on that has the potential to block my traffic, I need to be able to see into that first. I need to be able to build my confidence and to understand that, to understand what can happen if I actually turn this into blocking mode, which, as I mentioned before, a lot of organizations don't have their WAF in blocking mode because they may not have the visibility into it. They may not have the confidence they need to activate that blocking mode. Making sure that you have proper visibility and into what that WAF can do is extremely important. And then the second thing I'd say that's like very important to know and understand is like, under what circumstances can that WAF block traffic? Like if I were to turn this on to block traffic today, what circumstances would cause that WAF to block traffic? And that's very important into building confidence as well, because another thing is a lot of, what we would call legacy WAFs, out of the box, they're just going to instantly block attacks. They see a bad thing, they block the bad thing right away. But within the Fastly Next Gen WAF, we introduced the concept of threshold-based blocking. And that allows our customers to get into blocking mode much faster and build their confidence. And so they may start off with some higher thresholds, but they're going to block some things that are exhibiting high volumes of anomalous or attack behavior. And then as they build that confidence around the WAF, they'll start lowering their thresholds and lowering their thresholds. And then they get to a point where they feel very comfortable and they say, this is working great. I could see all the data. I have pure visibility into the request logs and the graphs, and I can see what's going on. We're going to go down into instant blocking mode. But that threshold blocking can give you time to build that confidence without just, wading through logs and nothing's happening, and you don't, you're trying to figure out when to enable it and when to not. So I look at, threshold blocking as a way to help you build that confidence into the WAF.
Natural follow-up on that. So artificial intelligence, AI, is all the rage. Definitely shifting our thinking around most of the things that we've been looking at, things like that. How does AI break or hopefully improve the web application firewall, or WAF? And can AI enable better real-time monitoring of these web calls and block things like SQL injection, like cross-site scripting, et cetera, especially when these requests are masked or even obfuscated?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I've been quite interested in this topic, and we've been discussing it quite a bit with my colleagues. But we definitely think that there's a lot of potential in this space. I mean, we're just seeing that the space is just exploding right now with possibilities. But at the moment, for at least detection, we're extremely confident in the detection that SmartParse is able to bring, and where we see ML and AI plugging in for us is being able to generate these novel attacks, being able to create the obfuscations and generate these novel attacks for us to test our detection engine against them and continue to expand that detection engine, because it's obviously it's hard to see into the future, but I think it's possible for AI, like you're saying, to be able to detect SQL injection and things like that. But we also have to we have to tread cautiously, because it goes back to the scenario that I mentioned before. If you're running a tech forum of some sort and people are pasting, SQL, it would just have to make sure that it's trained to be able to understand, oh no, that's a regular SQL query. That's not actual SQL injection. And it's an important distinction that would need to be made through that. So yeah, for us right now, we're just mostly interested in trying to explore like the attack vectors and payloads that could be generated by these technologies to flesh out our underlying technology.
Certainly. And regarding that, one of the things you mentioned earlier was MoveIt. So one of the things that I find interesting about the AI kind of take on this is, if the AI engine, hypothetically, that's integrated in the WAF, understands the application behind it, so something like IIS that I mentioned, and there's a vulnerability that's released, a patch that comes out that hasn't been patched on that server yet, maybe that AI could automatically know that this is what it's protecting, this is what the attack that's coming out. Okay, I'm going to block this until such time I'm told not to. Or even, you can have different degrees of adjustments where you could say the AI could be doing some more threshold blocking, like you said, around the information that knows behind it. And I think maybe that level of intelligence and understanding and context of what it's protecting may help it better. What are your thoughts around that?
I think you hit the nail on the head with the context part, right? Because that was another point that I was going to make, is that like sometimes in the current state, you have to train up the different models and they have to understand the context. And in some cases that could take time for as far as I know, I'm not an expert on this topic, but it could take time as you're continuously doing these new application deploys and things like that for it to learn that context. But if I'm understanding you correctly, I think you're basically saying like, if it was able to learn and understand the code base, that would arm it with even more context. And I tend to agree. But when you were saying that, what I also was wondering is like, if we get to that point, it makes me feel that if it's able to understand the code base and understand attacks coming at it, we're almost at the point where it's going to be able to suggest improvements in the code itself to say, hey, you're not using prepared statements here or whatever, right? And things of that nature. Because I mean, that would be great if we can get to a point where the technology is able to have more context on the actual code. Because like I was saying, it gets more challenging if it doesn't have context of the code and it's just watching traffic and it's trying to learn how that application, the good and the bad traffic, what happens when you deploy something new, right? How long does it take it to understand that?
So follow up to that, Daniel, your bio notes that you work on the signals and rules that power Fastly's next-gen WAF. What does your day-to-day work look like, and how do you determine signals and rules, and how does this like AI conversation play into that and factor into that as well? How do you decide what should be blocked, what is maybe something that should be a threshold? How do you make those determinations to help protect customers?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, I'm a product manager, so my day-to-day calendar looks a lot like playing Tetris. I am jumping around from everything from customer calls, working with sales engineers, having partner discussions, working internally with the engineering teams that I engage it with, and just a whole wide variety of things, offering support internally wherever I can on the part of the product that I'm responsible for. But to unpack like a little bit of what you said, so signals in the next gen WAF is like something that we apply based on analyzing the data. So for example, SQL injection is a signal, command injection is a signal, things of that nature. But we can also add signals if the IP is coming from anomalous sources. And then they also tie into what you mentioned, rules where customers can write their own business application logic rules to do things, block traffic, allow traffic, or add a signal, add their own custom signal because they want to monitor that traffic. They want to see more request logs. They want to see it in the graphs. Now, to answer your question, I think it was, I don't know if I think I don't know if it was intentional, but what you were essentially alluding to in your question, in my opinion, is like product management prioritization. Like as a product manager, how do I prioritize looking at this thing over that thing, or how do we prioritize where certain things happen? And it's a great question, right? We have to look at a lot of factors, and it's interesting. Like I was we have a prioritization process that we use because in the attacker world, everything is either like, let's just say roughly good or bad, right? But we can't, working on a security product, we can't always look at things like that. We have to look at things in a scale, right? And so at the top priority, of that scale would be like, oh, did someone discover are we usually detecting something and we're not detecting it because if you change something, that would be like what we would call a bypass. Or then there's a concept of false negatives. It's like we've never detected this thing, and in false negatives there's a scale. It's like is it something that is there a false negative from like an off-the-shelf scanner? Is it a false negative from payload obfuscation? Is it I can't go too much into detail on how we prioritize each of those things, but it's basically a broad spectrum of how we have to look at these different things. But to answer your other question around like when do we decide what to block as a threshold and whatnot, for us, everything that qualifies as an attack signal, which is SQL injection, command injection, traversal, we have a signal for backdoors and SSRF and things like that. All those, like there's log4j, JNDI is another one. Anything that we classify as an attack signal is out of the box threshold blocking, and then customers can add their own thresholds or rate limits on other anomalies or signals that they create.
Thank you for that. That is exactly what I was looking for. So how do companies, we mentioned a lot of these applications get deployed, they're configured, you mentioned cloud into this. How do companies need to adjust their thinking, or do they, when it comes to deploying applications in the cloud? And what does that look like from a web application firewall perspective? And is there visibility that can be provided from web application firewalls that are deployed in, say, Azure, AWS, or GCP, as well as those that are on-prem?
Well, for us, like we don't think that organizations, when they're using our WAF, that they need to change the way they deploy in cloud or on-prem, because we fit into both places. And the unique thing about our deployment options is we fit into both places at the same time. And so let's imagine a situation where you have a website, and part of the website is you're actually working to move to the cloud, but there's a period of time where maybe you have a hybrid deployment, right? And part of the website's in the cloud and part of it is on-prem. We're able to support both of those at the same time with a unified and consistent rule-based inspection engine, all of that, and you're able to see from like a global site view all of the activity and traffic across those deployment options. And so, that allows folks to get observability without having to go, I have to go to this console for my cloud stuff and I have to go here for my on-prem stuff. They go to one place and they're able to manage both of their deployment options. And then the other part is whenever they deploy our next gen WAF, the other thing we notice is a lot of folks start seeing a lot more things succinctly than they were used to seeing, because that's another thing historically and legacy WAFs. I feel like there's like an uneven balance. On one side, you'll have a WAF that's just like blowing up your log infrastructure, blowing up your alerts. It's hard to sift through and parse through the data. Or on the other side, it's just very quiet. There's nothing coming out of it, right? And there's not that balance. And we try to bring that balance by, when we generate alerts, we only generate an alert. If customers configure alerts, we only generate alert on a single event or attacker versus every single thing that attacker sent or came through. And that goes with our observability data as well. We try to present it in a succinct and manageable way that people can get into it and actually understand it and not feel overwhelmed by that data.
Thank you.
So in talking about what kind of feature set distinguishes a next-gen WAF from the more traditional cases that we've been talking about, clearly it seems like smart parse is one of those things. Deployment options and management options is probably one of those pieces. Does it also extend to like protocol support? Like I think you mentioned GraphQL earlier. Then you've got stuff like Speedy and HTTP2. Where obviously I think HTTP2 is like a binary format. like your traditional parsers aren't going to be able to do anything with that, right?
Yeah, it kind of. So like with HTTP2, it's a binary format, but the underlying like proxy, load balancer, whatever it is, generally translates it into an HTTP, a common HTTP structure. And so, behind the hood, behind the scenes, like definitely it's a binary format, but once the translation occurs, you can look at headers the same, paths the same, the method that's occurring, post, get, put, whatever, and the post body. But you're right. Like there's all these other, like, I like to call them sub protocols. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but that's what I personally like to call them. Where these
I understand what you mean. So that
yeah, and there's like, we can consider REST is one, right? REST could be a sub protocol. There's WebSockets. There's GraphQL. It's again, I'm going to date myself, but you have like SOAP and things like that, and then also gRPC has been coming up, and it's important for a modern WAF to be able to inspect these things, because what I like to say all the time is what starts in development ends in production. I think we all know that, right? And developers these days are controlling more of their end-to-end architecture than ever before. And when they're able to make a business use case for something like GraphQL, which is very easy to make, by the way, because it offers a lot of benefits and cost save, that includes cost saving. One day, a security analyst or security architecture team is going to wake up and they're going to be in a meeting and they're going to be like, yeah, we deployed GraphQL to production. And the security team's going to be like, wait, what? Does our WAF cover that? I don't know. And it's not a good position to be in.
Yeah, definitely. Daniel, thank you so much for being on today. We covered way more ground than I thought we'd be able to today. This is great.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It's my absolute pleasure.
Yeah, good stuff. And if you want to learn more, you can visit securityweekly.com/Fastly. And stick around. When we come back, we're going to talk managed detection and response with Andrew Mundell from Sophos.